Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Welcome to the Scripps College Humanities Institute Spring Semester of Events. I'm Yuval Avnor, Director of the Humanities Institute. This year's theme is a broader history of thought, as you might have seen in that opening slide. And we're exploring foundational ideas and traditions that precede or are independent of European influence throughout the world. Last semester, we hosted events on Aztec and classical Chinese thought. For this, the very special and first event of the spring semester, we'll consider some philosophical and political ideas from Africa, present-day Cameroon in particular. So here's how we will run the discussion. First, we'll hear the lecture from our speaker. The panelists that you see or don't see, I'm not sure, are the fellows, the Scripps College Humanities Fellows in our Humanities Institute seminar. The rest of the audience you cannot see may send in questions at any time through the Q&A function, and I'll ask the question time permitting on your behalf. So for our very first event, we are honored to have Professor AJUME H. Wingo. Dr. Wingo is an associate professor of political philosophy, associate director of the Center for Values and Social Policies, and the director of the Law and Philosophy program at the University of Colorado at Boulder. He hails from Cameroon. He attended the Cameroon College of Arts, Science, and Technology, where he studied economics, geography, and history. He also attended the University of Yaounde, Cameroon, where he studied law at the Faculty of Law and Economics. He obtained his BA from the University of California at Berkeley and MA and Ph.D. from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He did his postdoctoral research at Harvard and Boston universities. He's author of Veil Politics in Liberal Democratic States, published by Cambridge University Press. And he's currently working on 2 book manuscripts entitled In the Shade of Power and The Path for the Perplexed, The Peril of Leadercentrism in African Politics. After this short introductory video, we will Professor Wingo.
Asa probe na tu afia with them kuna bamla. Banda go me tu.
Bone nyang sa sinso a.
Nyang we on mo yin lanu wabune. Amamuro wasuri.
Very chakwe.
Okay. Well, I would like to start by acknowledging our present circumstances of the war with an unseen enemy, the coronavirus. Many uncertainties, but with one certainty, this will pass. Now, when Professor Juval Abner told me that I could speak with my own voice and not through the voices of dead white men that I'm accustomed to, I happily accepted the invitation. Thank you very much, Juval. Let me begin at the beginning by thanking the Humanities Institute at Scripps College for inviting me to this wonderful institution. And let me thank Ms. Becky Ackley for working hard, helping me to make this possible, and the technicians, who got this going. I can be a very difficult person to work with at times. Let me recognize Professor Justin Kaku, a fellow Cameroonian from Canada, and those attending from both the United States and from abroad. And there are many people that probably I don't see them, but they are somehow there. And let me thank Mrs. Stephanie Carter of Boulder, Colorado, for advising me to avoid philosophical and academic jargons and to enunciate my sentences for the audience. Miss Carter knows me very well, that I'm not someone who really take care of this. And I would like to thank Dr. Adam Amir, who is also, who was my student at the University of Colorado Boulder. And he visited my home, my kingdom, did a film called Kumbu Kola on the environment, came back and obtained his doctorate in philosophy in a very interesting area, using video to translate and to do philosophy. And he is actually standing up to make a film about Ngonso, and we can talk about that at some point. More importantly, let me thank the wonderful all-female student body of Scripps College. You are so lucky to be following on the heels of the towering Ellen Browning Scripps, a remarkable philanthropist and an extraordinary woman suffragist, and now an immortal, as we say in my home. She said of the paramount obligation of a college, and let me say it in her voice, the paramount obligation of a college is to develop in its students the ability to think clearly and independently, and the ability to live confidently, courageously, and hopefully. I think that this is why Ellen Scripps, through the Humanities Institute, invited me to make this presentation with the hope that behind this heavy accent, there may be something there to learn. I'm very grateful to the immortal, to the pantheon that Scripps is. Like the founder of Scripps, a woman, the founder of my kingdom in one corner of Cameroon was also a woman. I'm proud to report that she is my matrilineal ancestor. Ngonso is her name. She is the only woman I know of to have founded an enduring state on her own right without the aid of a man or men. She founded the state of Nso 626 years ago, and her descendants named their state and language after her. She migrated from Kimi. The capital of the state of Nso is Kimbo or Kumbu, which translates into Kemet, from where we originally came from southern Egypt or northern Sudan. Today, the people of Nso worldwide numbers about 1.2 million people. In Nigeria, where some of them settle, they are referred to as the Panso, and have their own officially recognized constituency represented in the government of Nigeria. In the service of full disclosure, I'm a prince from that state of Nso, with the title of Shentum Fund, the emissary of the fund representing all institutions and establishments which are not of Nso origin, but are serving the interests of the Nso people worldwide. One of my daughters is a princess of Nso with the title of Yanso, or simply the princess of Nso. This presentation is a chapter from a manuscript that I'm working on. It is entitled In the Shade of Power, with a tentative subtitle, The Power of the Powerless, or democratizing democracy. I'm still to choose which one I should use. Let me start by pointing out that Ngonso had a remarkable sympathy for ordinary people suffering from power. What is even more extraordinary is that she had great sympathy and empathy for ordinary people's ambition for power. The desire by ordinary people for power is the peace, or the center, or the secret of Ngonso's enduring constitution. In contrast, contemporary African governments and their counterpart Western government and the United Nations share this in common. They have remarkable sympathy for the suffering of ordinary people from power, but almost zero sympathy for same ordinary people's ambition for power. Let me give you some evidence for this claim. When the government of China react harshly to protesters in Hong Kong and Taiwan by beating them, maiming them, imprisoning the protesters, some of them are killed, some of them have to flee their country. When we get this predictable reaction from the Secretary General of the United Nations and from Western nations, they say to the Chinese government, please exercise restraint. And then they call on the protesters to avoid violence and to protest peacefully. I mean, why do they have sympathies for protesters suffering from power and little or no sympathy for protesters' desire for power? That's the answer. According to Western governments, the United Nations and contemporary African government, the only alternative to state power is an even brutal chaos, or what Thomas Hobbes called the state of nature. And in his words, according to Thomas Hobbes, in such a state, which he called a state of nature, I'm quoting Hobbes, there is no place for industry because the fruit thereof is uncertain, and consequently no culture of the earth, no navigation, no use of commodities that may be imported by sea, no commodious buildings, no instruments of moving and removing such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time, no arts, no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. End of quote. Who in their rightful mind will not be moved by this frightening alternative to the state? I mean, show me the person and I'll read back Thomas Hobbes' quote to the person until they acknowledge that, you know, this is a horrible place, a horrible alternative to the state. I will point to one person who was not moved by this. That person was no other than our remarkable Princess Ngonso. If you look behind me, you see her portrait behind me. She's the one that is not moved by this. And I will explain why. Yet, Thomas Hobbes' remarkable quote doesn't answer the question. Let's ask the question again. Why is it that contemporary African elites and their Western counterpart has almost zero sympathy or tolerance for ordinary people's desire for political power? Answer. Western political philosophers and theorists have a myopic or idiosyncratic view of power as one and indivisible, as a zero sum. If the state has it, then no one else can have it at the same time. In this wise, the only alternative to the state is the state, nothing else. This is crazy, to say the least. I mean, seriously crazy, or what the Americans would say, wacky. Let me back my claims with these exhibits. Exhibit 1. During the so-called Arab Spring, one heard the chants of protesters. And I went there to witness the Arab Spring in Egypt, in Tunisia, and in Libya, in person, whereas it was happening. One heard the protesters cry, Bin Ali of Tunisia must go. Gaddafi of Libya must go. Mubarak of Egypt must go. And this goes on for the rest of Africa. Ask them, as I've done over the years, this question, what happened when the leaders that you so much want go, finally go, and get this answer? Well, we will conduct elections, and then we'll presumably elect a good leader. So for African youth, leaders are both the problem and the solution. And African youth are constantly looking for an Akhenaten of ancient Egypt, Ngonso of Cameroon, Sunjata Keita of Mali, and Mandela of South Africa. These extraordinary leaders are by nature extraordinary, rare, and far in between. They are the result of luck par excellence. But who wants her life to be ruled by luck? Exhibit 2. Marxism penetrated Africa from the 1960s to the 1990s and left remarkable influence on African elites and youth of the idea that political power is a zero-sum good. As such, Marxism as an ideology of political power was based upon a mistaken conception of the reality of power. They hold strictly to the zero-sum conception of power, and as such, when things are not going right with those in power, their only alternative is not to tamper or mess around with the structure of power as is, but to replace bad big boys with presumably good big boys. Marx was very remarkable for this. He just thought the way to do it is to invent, is to reverse the whole structure of power so that the proletariat become the one in charge and the bourgeoisie become the one that are being ruled. The last shall become the first, and the first shall become the last. That is Marxism. Exhibit 3. Elections in almost all of African states are almost always about which big boy and now big girls should occupy power and nothing else. They see no alternative to the state power. The idea of election is to replace one big bad boy with another boy. African youth who are looking for something better for their lives seem to be stuck in this conception of power that has for so long served them so poorly and set their schedule for good government back. But there is good news. Help is on the way. Inters Princess Ngonso with good news for African youth and for political theorists and philosophers. Ngonso would admonish African youth who risk their life protesting against their government for something better to cultivate the art of power. African youth should not destroy their royalty. They should make every woman into a queen and every man into a prince. They should not even destroy the caste system. They should make every person into a Brahman. According to Ngonso, never level down anyone, level up every citizen. That's what African youth should be doing. And youth anywhere who are looking for something better, who want a responsive government for themselves. What contemporary African states and their Western counterparts see at the end of each revolution is darkness, like the one that Thomas Hobbes talks about. They never imagine that at the other end of the revolution, they may see a bright light. And I mean sublime beauty and loveliness. The one person who sees loveliness at the end of protest is Ngonso. According to Ngonso, power is not only a good thing, but a very beautiful thing. Once we master the art of power. Why is that? Her view of power is not like those of contemporary African elites. Theirs is like a kiss that dry on the lips of the lover without warming the soul. Ngonso's conception is like a kiss with a steely edge that does not only warm your heart, but cut through your entire being into the soul and get lodged there and continue warming the heart for a very long time. For us, her descendants, 626 years and counting. What is political power for Ngonso? What is political power? And I dare to say that political philosophers in the West, they, for some reason, it seems like they always dodge from this question of political power. And when it does come in, they will talk about it under justice, equality, democracy, and whatever. I will tell you this. If you go on to talk about justice and talk about equality and talk about liberty without power, it is like drinking Coca-Cola with no flavor. You know, it's just water. It's like making a sacrifice to the ancestors with a chicken without a head. Let's define what she means via negativa by saying what it is not. Political power is not a zero-sum good. It is not a zero-sum good such that if one person has it, then another person cannot have it at the same time. Everyone can have power at the same time and place. Power is like love. You can love everyone and there will still be plenty of love out there. Let's give her view some specifics. Let's give it some friction on the ground. Now some jargons, and I hope that you understand this. She divided power into two, political power into two. Positive power and negative power. Let me start with positive power. Positive power defined as the ability, not even the ability, but the exercise to dispossess, subjugate, enslave, dominate, take people's stuff from them, decide who should have sex with who, decide who to kill and who to spare, decide who to have education and who not to have education. This is the power that states need to provide security and striving for its citizens. This power is confined to states. Negative power. Negative power is the power against what no one, including the state, can do to you and me as ordinary people, as the powerless. It is a shield against the inevitable power of the state. It is a shield, S-H-A-D-E, against the blaring tropical sun of Africa. It is born of the view that the state, like the sun, has been here, is here, and it is here to stay. In fact, I will say this. Where there are more than one person, if they are to flourish, there is political power. Whether you see it or not. In fact, I will say this. If there were more than one God, they will need political power. Again, the metaphor of the sun. That's the sun initiates the process of photosynthesis, giving us the nutrient that we need to survive. And also giving us a tan at the beaches of California. I know Santa Monica Beach. I know they are wonderful beaches, by the way. At the same time, the sun can bring about drought, sending thousands into starvation and even to their death as a result. According to Gonzo, what each citizen needs is a shade to shield herself against the inevitable excesses of the sun while still getting the good stuff that only the sun can provide. Okay, you need the state. The state is here to stay. You shield yourself against the excesses of the state while getting the protection and security and the flourishing that only the state can provide when we live together. Positive power like the sun is here to stay. As such, African youth protesting for something better should not try to level down the state. That is the fool's errand. It is the fool's errand. it is barking up the wrong tree. Instead of leveling down the state's personnel, they should be busy leveling them up. As such, political power in so is power in tension. It is power in tension. The executive pushing on one side and the ordinary citizen pushing on the other side in search of an equilibrium. And it is always like that, pushing back and forth, back and forth. That's why life in my kingdom is never, there's not a single boring moment in my kingdom. If you want life that's no boring, visit. Gonzo knew about checks and balances of the state, and she was the master of it. If you want to know about real checks and balances, come to Nso and you will see something remarkable. You will see something that you've never seen that has no relationship with the West. But checks and balances, when we think about the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative branches of government, they are all part of the state. They constitute the state. And you don't tell me that the state should police the state. It doesn't work that way. Okay? According to Ngonso, focusing on check and balances is not good enough because it is focusing on the states. Ngonso constitution went beyond these checks and balances. According to Ngonso, leveling up people is the true art of power. It is the art of establishing a dignitarian community. In fact, my kingdom is known as a dignitarian community. Dignity is at the core. Everyone is dignified in his or herself, to the point that the word for dignity in my language is viwir, which is, viwir means the people. Okay. And the idea that people will be headed like cattle, broken like horses, beaten like dumb animals. You will never hear that in the state of so. No sort of person in their rightful mind will ever allow that to happen to them. Formal protections, rights, and legal privileges of citizenship are very, very easy to articulate, even if they may be difficult to enforce or realize. They are very easy to articulate. Establishing a sense of belonging is not just or even principally a matter of articulating formal protections, but requires statesmen and stateswomen of the highest order adept at building a genuine constitution for a genuine dignitarian community. How did Ngonso do it? Again, we go down to the ground. Separated by geography and time, separated by, let me remember Stephen's advice, separated by geography and time, nearly 3,000 kilometers and 200 years apart. Sunjata Keita, who was the founder of the Malian Empire, and Ngonso could not be closer than in their sympathies for the powerless persons ambitious for power as their protective shields against insult to their dignity as human persons. Sunjata Keita lays out the formal negative power, and Ngonso shows Africans how to pragmatically achieve it, not by leveling down leaders, recognizing that such attempt has led to violence and chaos of the kind that will stymie what Africans need most. But by peaceful, determined petitioning and civic protest for negative power. Soundiata Keita, as I mentioned, was a lawgiver of ancient Malian Empire in Africa, whose oath of the Manding dated around 1222, also incorporate the concepts of negative power. The oath is sometimes referred to as the oath of the hunters because the West African Sacred Society of Hunters has been the guardians of the oath ever since it was formulated by Soundiata Keita. The substance of the oath provides a genuinely African blueprint for a state that is responsive to the ambitions of its citizens for negative power. Consider, for instance, for the sake of time, let's just take three of its articles, which together constitute what you may call here the Bill of Rights. The first article is a statement of equality of all individuals. A statement of equality of all individuals. I quote, "The hunters declare, every human life is a life. It is true that a life comes to existence before another life, but no life is more ancient, more respectable than another life, just as no life is superior to another life." End of quote. The sixth article bans slavery, thus beating by several hundred years the abolitionist movement in enlightened Europe. I quote, "The hunters declare the root of slavery is extinct in this day, from a wall to the other, from a border of the Manding to the other. Razzia is banned in Manding from now on. The torments created by those horrors are over, starting this day in the Manding." What a trial torments are, especially when the oppressed has no recourse. For the slave is given no consideration nowhere in the world. The seventh article asserted the universal freedom of association and speech. People from ancient time, and I'm quoting, people from ancient time tell us, in other words, our ancestors tell us, man as an individual made of bones and flesh, marrow and nails, of skin covered with hackles and hair, is nourished by food and drinks. But his soul, S-O-U-L, his spirit lives out of three things: to see whom he wants to see, to say what he wants to say, and to do what he wants to do. Should one of these things be missing from the human soul, it would certainly suffer from it and wilt. End of quote. The oath itself stated a general principle of self-determination and economic freedom. From now on, I quote, From now on, everyone shall enjoy self-determination. Everyone shall be free in their actions. Everyone shall dispose of the fruits of their labor. This is the oath of the manding for the rest of the world to hear. End of quote. The oath of the hunter is not merely an African historical relic. It is an African powerful resource for African youth. This is a guidepost on how they can begin to change what it is that has for so long constantly stymied their energies, their resolve, their imagination, and their human resources. What it is that has set their schedule back from taking their rightful place in the universe. That is the top place, and teaching the world how to live a sublime, beautiful, lovely, and lovable life. The oath is a formal pronouncement, but there is need for these to gain traction. Gonzo's focus was on personal responsibility. Personal responsibility. The state should spur individuals to take on personal responsibility. Without personal responsibility, the formal declaration becomes worse than useless. To this effect, she refers to the Constitution as a frame around a picture. I'm talking about a just ordered constitution, or what John Rawls will call a well-ordered constitution. She referred to such a constitution as a frame around a picture. The picture is the sense of belonging, and I highlight the word sense of belonging. The constitution that does not align and doesn't touch your five senses, as Gonzo will put it, or as I put it, is worse than useless. It is a constitution of a state that is run by luck, by fortuna. As I'm saying this, if one goes to look at a picture and start admiring the frame, then that is a bad frame. A good frame directs one's focus to the picture. In fact, a good frame by master founders of states like Gonzo is invisible, focusing one's attention to the picture. Now, please do not rush to Gonzo looking for a constitution in a papyrus, a parchment, or etched in stone, patching in some wall or in some glass case in a museum. If you go looking for that, and so you surely find none. Gonzo constitution is grander and graver than something to be written on a paper, and she wasn't on her way of writing at the time of her constitution. A good constitution demands amnesia as well as attention. By amnesia, it demands that we forget certain things. But it also demands that we pay very close attention. It is the totality of rituals, of symbols, of traditions, of mores, of ethos, of precedents, and the way we do things out here. It is the history of these people here in this small patch of the earth, coming from some future, from some past, eternal past, real or imagined, with their narrative to here, determining who belong and who doesn't belong, and marching to an eternal future. This is because the reason why a constitution touches the senses, not just your mind, like the little book of the Constitution that I have here on my table, is because your true self or truest self, okay, Truest, your truest self is more than your thoughts. There's something that your thoughts help to illuminate and to obscure, hide and reveal. Okay? Hide and reveal. It's not, your true self is not as Descartes will say, I think, therefore I am. That is a very myopic view of who we are as human beings, unless you want to create human beings that has never been seen or known to exist, as philosophers all over often do, and then write about them. The shade of power is both a real shade, as you saw on the video, and a metaphorical shade. Let me start with the real shades. The real shades, okay, S-H-A-D. There are two actual shades provided by two fig trees in the capital of the state of Nso. They are referred to in our land of Nso as the shades of the gods. Historically, mad people will sit under these trees, knowing fully that once under those trees, no one, including the state, can disturb them or can tamper with them. In fact, there was a woman called Mameramye who conveniently, a mad woman called Mameramye, which is, what is despairing is useless. That's what the name meant. Who conveniently set her restaurant under this tree, serving breakfast to strangers, passers-by, and natives of the land. And then the rest of the time, she will naked herself and run around, which is an abomination in the land of Nso. That type of life is called the life of zoo, and it's not acceptable for human being. But that was Mameramye. She could do that. There was another madman called Bonge, which means lost and found. And she will conveniently sit under this tree. She actually will sleep there. In fact, the whole area has been named after him, knowing fully that nobody, when you are sitting there, you are totally shielded from the blaring, harsh sun from the blaring, harsh African tropical sun, or from the excesses of power from both the state and the individuals. The laws of the land are posited to people by the Ngurong Nocturnal Council. Nocturnal Council is the most important council in the land of Nso. They meet at midnight to cogitate, to to think about the laws of the universe, the laws of the earth, and the laws of the patch of land where we are. Now, you saw that in your video also, in the video, on the video also. Let's look at the establishment of the metaphorical shade. The shade as a metaphor. Two ways to look at it. One is the provision of central dignity ensuring resources. Dignity ensuring resources is to provide the insurance for every citizen of Seoul to fend him off, to fend tyrants and anybody off from around them. And the second is to provide the spur for people to take on personal responsibility so as to ensure that they are shielded from all this, from everyday tyrants, which means by everyday tyrants, I mean in the world around us, there are people that, there are bullies, there are, apart from the state, these are left by empty space that the state cannot cover. You have bullies, you have people that will cajole, you know, young women, you know, to abuse them, you know, and you have all of these everyday tyrants, you know, passive aggression and all of that. Now, let me give you some modalities. Land as private property. Now, land is very important. In fact, Abraham Lincoln was right when after the Emancipation Proclamation, he decided that every African American will be entitled to 40 acres of land. And I think today we can say a Lexus, right? He was a me back then. Now you can, it might be a Lexus or a Cadillac. You know, so now, every son and daughters of soul, every son and daughters of the soil is entitled to the land of her own or his own. Having land ensure that you don't have people who will come in and dispossess and dominate people. In fact, I will not go on to the ritual of this because this, as I say, the Constitution must touch the heart and the soul. I put it, it should be a kiss that doesn't dry at the lover's lips, but that penetrate deep and continue to warm the soul. And that's what those rituals are for. Everyone is entitled to land. The imperative, when you are entitled to that land, now that you have your own piece of the earth, build your own house on it. And farm your own crops on it is an imperative. These allow people to farm and to build a house, thereby taking personal responsibility. I'll not go through all of that. Water is a public resource. Gonzo made it that way. It's a public resource because, as we say in my life, in my home, water is the first medicine for any kind of illness. In fact, water is life. And to allow individuals to consume water will mean that this individual will be able to quid pro quo to control citizens of Job. I will not go through the rituals of how this land of how water is even constructed and how this is done. If you want that, you should read the book or ask me for the chapter. I think some of you read it, you will find it's very beautiful, and intense. Now, morality. The morality also is functional. Morality is around power. Power is the piece of life. It is the center of life. Anyone who thinks that morality doesn't have to do with power, such a person is a political infant. Morality is also about power, whether we know the source or not. But power is functional, morality is functional to power. And so there is a distinction between a human being and a person. Everybody is a human being. You are either a human being or you are not. That is the imperative in so. And if you are a human being, you are entitled to irreducible dignity, matched by irreducible obligation. Now, personhood, very important. In my land, personhood is something to be achieved. The higher, the better. It's also in Nigeria, it's also in Ghana and many African countries. Someone who failed to achieve personhood will be referred to in Lamso as an empty person. And someone will point to such a person and say, hey, look there, a dead man walking. They will be called empty person. They will be called no person. This is force, it forces people, it spurs people to take personal responsibility. When you grow up and you're a young man, you should build a small hut. And if you don't do this on your land, then people will look at you, or your age cohort will ask you, where did you make adobe bricks or sun-dried bricks before the rain came and spoiled it? Or they'll say, where did you gather the grass for roofing your house before fire caught it? And they'll say, you are not a person, leave our company. And a house that was full of kids that were fat, and fat translates here as healthy. They were going to school and were flourishing, will score very high indeed. And if you discriminate, and if the household was full of kids from extended family that don't belong to you, and then what is more, kids from other places, from strangers that you are taking care of, you will score very high indeed. And if you discriminate against one of those kids, then you will fall, you will score negatively and come down. And then for people, there will be people that could, in one way or the other, using their mind, their heart, and their soul, are able to challenge the norms of the society, are able to challenge the legality of the society in a peaceful way, in a way that penetrates people. Such a person become a pantheon. They will become immortal. They will be immortalized. They will live with us. They become ancestors. And their death celebration is a mighty thing. There is more about this which you guys can ask. Now, there is another aspect to this that Gonzo brought forth, what we call noble bearing. In fact, Jeremy Waldron, who was my mentor at the University of California Berkeley, who is now a professor at NYU, He is from New Zealand, wonderful person. He literally tutored me. He wrote the preface to my book. He is a philosopher par excellence. He is the one that listened to me and said, AJUME, go forth and write some of these things. He talked also about noble bearing. Let me give you some of the aspects of the noble bearing so that we can stop and get some questions. You have what we call civic orthopedic or moral orthopedic. Orthopedic. Orthopedic, I don't know. I think you guys know this. You know, basically upright gait, standing erect, sitting erect without slouching, I don't know. Slouching. Walking into a room like someone to be reckoned with. In fact, girls are taught at a young age in my home to balance water on their head or bowls of water on their head, stuff on their head, in order that they might have this orthopedic to stand up erect. Many people see this and they say, "Oh, look at those primitive people." It's not is design. It's by design. It's not from poverty, at least in so. They are taught to do that. In fact, there are some of the masquerades of the land, like the one that you saw. They teach this lesson through public theater, through performance. Kids can begin to see this and they imitate how to walk erect. They say in my home that, you know, I'm not a gorilla. Because if you walk like a gorilla, you may be haunted. Haunted by who? Haunted by tyrants, everyday tyrant. Another noble bearing is civic optic. We call it in my home, civic optic. You look at someone on the Indian, they call it the third chakra. You look at someone directly on the forehead. When you are in the crowd and you are making a speech, you look at people. You look on top of people. You never bend your head to look at people down. You look straight and your look should be strong. You shouldn't waver your eye. You shouldn't move your head back and forth, up and down. When you look at someone, you hold your head steady as you look at them. This is very important because this is the way that you fend off tyrants. You look at someone like someone to be reckoned with. There is also the safe application of laws. In fact, let me say a little thing about this civic optic. In the land of so, in the morning, kids, you wake up kids, the father and the mother, they wake up kids very early in the morning, around in the wee hours, around 5 a.m. and they will take them outside and then they'll get the kid to look at you straight on the face and then they will ask you, is it daybreak yet? With a strong voice, is it daybreak yet? And then you answer, yes, it is daybreak. And this is done constantly. And if you are walking on the street and you see a stranger and see anybody, you look at them on the street, straight on their face, and you ask them, is there any news? And they'll answer you, no, there's no news. That is also social. It's also the way of latching on to other people. It also has to do with our existential, with our spiritual existential life, recognition of a person as a person. Then there is a safe application of laws. and moral rules. Everyone is expected, everyone, man and woman and kids, they are expected to be safe applicator of the laws of the land, the laws of the earth, and the laws of the universe. You shouldn't leave room for some policeman or some moral police or someone to get into your center. If, like in United States, if it says drive 25 miles an hour, you do not drive 40 miles an hour. Well, there are reasons for this that we'll not get into. There is also self-representation. Speaking and acting for oneself and not through others, as if one was Fluffy the cat or Clifford the dog, that people will speak on their behalf. As a human being, as a woman, as a lady, you don't allow your husband to speak on your behalf. That is not, it doesn't happen. And so a woman speak and act for themselves. You don't want Bernard Williams, late Bernard Williams, who was my mentor at UC Berkeley, would say, you don't want reform members of the oppressed group to be speaking on your behalf. Okay, so in speech, you should speak strongly and clearly, demonstrating abstraction and clinching points with epigrammatic proverbs that captures the whole of our human life. You should always punctuate what you say, punctuate abstraction and clinching points with proverbs. Despairing. Never despair. So people say, no woman should ever despair. Complaining and whining, even if you are hurt, even you are hurting, is unseemly of a dignitarian so woman or so person. You should be no one's lucky. If you are to marry someone, you marry them as a partner, not as a slave to a man or to a woman or to anybody. You don't contract debt that you cannot pay, and do not prostrate before another human being at all. This, you know, Immanuel Kant, the Sage of Königsberg, says this very, very well, actually, more clearly. You would think that Ngonso was speaking through him, or that Ngonso was speaking through him. Okay, so now you have the spirituality of vitality. Our spirituality is a power kind of spirituality. It's called a spiritual of vitality. In fact, it is said in so that there is a very big bird, they're called Nubian vultures. They are huge. They live in the desert. It is said that they go where there are signs of death. And so they talk about death in life. If you don't sit like this, despairing, you don't walk, you walk with your hand, you walk straight, you look straight, you stand up erect. In fact, going out is a whole career on its own when you are going out to the public theater. That is why Gonso Quazon, the private sphere, so people can prepare for the theater. Tyrants look for signs of death. And when you show them that sign of death, they immediately come there. And I'll tell you this, if I were to write on African spirituality, it is not, African spirituality has nothing to do with God, the Almighty. In fact, the concept of God just came to us. We just adopted that concept not too long ago. The spirituality of the Abraham variety. You know, these are the kind of spirituality, and I'm not criticizing, the variety that you find in Nigeria, in Cameroon, in Ghana, in cities. They are merchants of fear and hope. That is horrible, because the spirituality in Africa put total responsibility on the individual. What happened and doesn't happen depends upon what we do and we don't do. And that's why when Islam and Christianity came, people were quick to take it because they provided a way out. When something happened, it is Satan, or it is God, it is this. In fact, the spirituality of vitality says that you sit in the cockpit of your own life. And that is why the Africans, the music, when people, they dance very hard. The music is not to be listened, it's also to be danced. And it's not just physically, mentally. Mentally, you should be active. You should be creative. You should, we call it sim. I'm not going into this because this is an infinite resource. Your mind is the infinite and infinite renewable resource. And in that mind is found everything that has been, is, and will be. That's all we need. There is no other being outside of us. When we appeal to ancestors, we're appealing to this for this kind of reason. And I will tell you this, every sort of person, when you find them anywhere, they are very proud to be the descendants of Ngonso. And as I will say to you from scripts, be Ngonso, be scripts, but also be Ngonso. These remarkable women. You know, and when you find a person so in any way, as someone, when I call someone, I was talking to them, and in Bamenda, that is a city not too far from the kingdom, and or from the Fondom, not just the kingdom. When she found out that I was from So, she screamed. She said, "Those people from So," she said, "You know them from, you can, in the crowded streets of Bamenda, when you see either and so woman and so man or and so child, you can tell right away it is the way they walk. They walk like they own the world." And in fact, to so person, everybody is a stranger. Okay, the universe is theirs. Okay, and when at one point, so became a magnet for immigrants. Immigrants came from all over. In fact, these immigrants were allowed to keep the names of their homes of origin and their languages. Today, you go there, you find them. Many. Then so actually, so people, they are not that many. And people used to say, they say of Ngonso, they said, well, it is because Ngonso established this, Ngonso was a superpower that they allow immigrants to come in. No, Ngonso said it's the other way around. We became a superpower because of immigrants. Okay, and therefore, as Ngonso we say, we shouldn't level down our constitution. We should make every Winso into a Wilfon. Every Winso is the general population. So Wilfon are the royals. He said we should make everybody into a royal. And I think we should really stop here and entertain some questions and answers.
for the country where they love themselves now and insult people. Now the only village that where they love themselves, if the whole Cameroon be like insult, wash the country for be the best country in the whole world. The way some man like in some man. In my next life, I want to be in some man. The way in some man like in some man. If Cameroonian feel like Cameroonian, so only people for the country where they love themselves now insult people. Now the only village that where they love themselves, if the whole Cameroon be like insult, wash the country for be the best country in the whole world. The way some man like in some man. In my next life, I want to be in some man. The way in some man like in some man. If Cameroonian feel like Cameroonian, so.
Okay, I just found this video, by the way. I just found it on WhatsApp. I don't know who this guy is. I learned that he's from Nigeria. I don't know. Please don't quote me on it. I think he's from Nigeria. And he's speaking Pidgin. And probably some of you understand what he's saying. If you don't, he's saying that the only people who love themselves are the Seoul people. That in his next life, he would like to be a person from Seoul. And that even so, if the whole Cameroon love each other like the way the Seoul people love themselves, then we will be the most powerful country in the world. Okay? So he's, but this is by design. It's not by trial and error. It's not by luck. It is by the design of Princess Ngonso, the lawgiver of Nso. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wingo. I'm sure there's a lot of applause that we can't hear in the audience. So thank you very much for that. We have time for a few questions. Oh, wow, thank you. Somebody, one of our technicians found an applause sound, thank you. So we have some time for questions. I want to open it up to the anyone on the panel first, if they have any questions they'd like to ask. And if not, we'll go to the audience questions. Yeah, just go ahead and unmute if you're on the panel, you can go on.
Okay, first, I want to say thank you so much for your speech, Professor Wingo. I really enjoyed hearing you talk. And a question I was wondering is, what do you think is the relation between important figures such as Ngonso, the founder, and the concept of leveling people up today? That is to say, like, what is the role of these figures in that process today?
Okay. Thank you very much, Hannah. I noticed that you are here first. So what is the relationship between, can you say it again, Hannah, please? Let me get it right.
Important figures such as Ngonso
Yes.
in the role of leveling people up today, if there is.
Yeah. I'm afraid to say that we do not have the only figure that I saw not too long ago, and there may be many that I don't know, is Nelson Mandela. And, you know, I'm afraid that you don't have that many. Again, the problem with contemporary Africa is the idea of really leveling people down. To say this, I do not want to make light of the civil rights in America. Civil rights, they are very, very important in America. But again, as I said to you before, that these civil rights, there is some bankruptcy in them because it is easy to declare them. What is really difficult, as I said, is a kind of kiss that doesn't dry on the lips of the lover. And I think that I don't see it happening that much. I don't know, many people, they blame corporations. Corporations, in Gonzo view, in Gonzo constitution, these are part of the power structure. And the fact that I'm not blaming corporations, and we shouldn't bring down our billionaires. We should make everybody into a billionaire. Okay? Okay. Many people say, let's bring them down. We shouldn't. Okay. So again, there is a tension where one want to bring people down and the other one and people need to push back. But they need these resources that Gonzo and Sundiata Keita provide that I just brought down to you. It's not just the idea that you have these rights. You know, you have this constitution that I have here. It's not just that. It is the attitude. It is the way you walk. It is the way you talk. It is how you carry yourself. It is your conception of yourself. It is, more importantly, not just belonging, but the sense of belonging. Black Lives Matter, after over 400 years of African American in this country, they will get up today and they will go on the street to say Black Lives Matter. I think from Gonzo, this is a soul-searching moment when the people, when the Nocturnal Council will send people on a soul-searching mission, as they'll say, to the sky, to the earth below, to east, to west, to north, to south, to go and find out where are we going wrong, such that our law enforcement officers that are supposed to protect all of us will turn around and do this to people, to other people. What is going wrong? That our young people, meaning young Black kids, will end up in jails, will end up looking at the country as if it's not their own. They live here as if life is somewhere else. When we start asking ourselves that question, we have a sense of Gonzo constitution. But the way it is now, they will say, what manner of people are those, pointing at these young Black people? If only they could just do what the police ask them to do, everything will be all right. Who is putting cocaine in between their mouth? Who is stopping them from coming to script? Show me the person and we'll swing the American battle axe against the person. But at that moment, you look around, there's nobody. But it's not the constitution, it's not just, it is having that sense. That's why Gonzo constitution couldn't be written on the text. And at some point, we need to forget certain things, Hannah. So it's a very important question. Let's entertain some.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Do we have another panelist question?
Yeah, I had a question with regards to the philosophy.
Yes,
when you mentioned, you said the truest self is more than your thoughts.
yes.
And I'm interested to know more about what you would define the truest self to be, and what else it would constitute, like how would, according to this philosophy, we define the truest self? Is it related to personhood or humanness? How can we sort of like?
You know, this is really, I'm not reacting to Descartes, but I just happen to know that Descartes say, I think, therefore I am. I'm not reacting to Western academy, because the idea of Western academy is the mind. The Enlightenment is about the mind. You know, you have to throw everything that is not thought out. You have to throw feelings out. In fact, Western democratic governments are designed to exclude feelings of any kind. For some reason, when people like Adolf Hitler uses symbols and ritual and art to create atrocities, people somehow they wasn't waiting that we need to just throw that out. Sure, there are certain excesses, but you may need that to solve the problems of what this person will come and do. And so our truest selves are not our thoughts. It's something bigger that our thoughts obscure, right? And also hide and reveal. And that will constitute a philosophical thesis. All I'm saying is that when it comes down to that, we need to think in terms of our humanity. You are, Hannah, whether Nettie, like a good lawyer, you don't ask a question when you don't know the answer. I think that what you adumbrated it very well. You need to take that as a thesis and move it forward and move it further. To do this, you may need to look beyond here, look into Africa, look into Native Americans, look into the Maoris, look into India, you know, where these philosophies are. If you collect this material from there together, you're going to come out something remarkable. You may come out with the concept of what I may call the truest self. But Ngonso Constitution is, as I said, is the Constitution to her is like a frame around a picture. The picture is what these ourselves are. And these ourselves involve the sense of belonging. It is the sacred answer to the final questions of life. Why am I here? Who am I? The kind of question that in the wee hours of the morning, some of you guys, when you contemplate, some of the time it gets people contemplating suicide or having panic attacks. But Ngonso Concern is meant to answer these kind of existential problems. And to answer, you have to reach the truest self. And the truest self is more than just our thought.
Fantastic way to frame what we're going to be doing throughout the semester. So I especially appreciated that. Let's get a couple. We have a room for a couple more questions. Let me get a couple from the audience members in attendance. I'm just going to pick a few. So one question is about the video you showed at the beginning. The question is, I noticed in the video you shared at the beginning that the Supreme Court is solely made up of men. What positions of power do women have in your kingdom in the present day? Wonderful.
If you look at the video very carefully, it was actually inundated by women. It's all about women. Women, they have very powerful position. And in my kingdom, it's not a fight between men and women. It is a kind of, as I say, self-governance. And if self-governance is done well, it doesn't matter sometimes who is there. Women, we have the first advisor to the king is a woman. And you have, there are women's secret societies in my home. One of them is called a Chong, you know, and then La Folie that are just confined to women, not men. Just like you have, and the officials in the palace. More than half of, actually, most of the officials in the palace are women. So in that way, there is a way, I think it will be very interesting to go down and really take statistics and find out which role is which. The chief priest and the chief priestess, there are two women, there's a man and there's a woman the chief priest and the chief priestess, the one that are responsible for the ancestors. They are women. And in fact, not too long ago, women are so powerful in my kingdom, the kingdom of Gonzo, that there was a time that if you touch a woman, your hand touches a woman, and you are a man, you'll be lashed, you'll be given public lashing. Then a woman beat you, nothing really happened. I mean, there was some cry of discrimination here and there. So I would say that if you go in terms of official position in the government of so, in the state of so, they are almost about the same. Not to, in saying this, I don't want to downplay the forces of colonialism. The reason why we still have our culture intact is because we are far up the hills, far in the mountain towards Nigeria, and when the colonizers came, one of the things that they did in my home is that because they came from patriarchal societies, they favored the men. They created the House of Chiefs, and the House of Chiefs are just men, just like the way it was back in their home. And then they educated young men, and including the Christian, Muslims, this Abrahamic religion, they also did a lot in terms of really shaking this balance of power. Because when they came in, the catechist, the bishop, the father, the pastor, and all of these people, they are all men. And they educated people as such. Okay? And also, when you came to my home, we don't have this, the image that you saw in the palace, the part is the image of the woman, of a woman. There's no other image there. And then you saw those women on some of the imagery. Now, when I visited the church in my home, the first thing that when I look at the walls of the churches, what I see are all men, and they are all white men. All. Few women, only Holy Mary, okay? And then Presbyterian churches and all of this. And you please, do not look down on the power of these colonialists, of the colonizers in my home, in upsetting the balance of power. So I don't want to say that the power is still as balanced as it was, but it is the best, or it is the worst except for the rest, as to paraphrase Church here. Okay, it's the worst except for the rest.
Thank you. Another question from another audience member. This one from Montreal, Canada. How does one motivate themselves into leveling up members of a state when it is failing at providing basic services? That is, when the sun rays are not strong enough to provide photosynthesis.
Yes. And I think that is the reason why one of the things that I said was that we shouldn't, the way that the African youth, they are doing it, and the way that that they do it is to level down our leaders. They must go. This one must go. Now, we do need those rays of the sun to provide photosynthesis. Let me give one example of what happened in my home. About 100 years ago, I don't have the precise date, there was a faun or a king, one of my ancestors, who was very violent. He killed many people. He was so, and many, there was soul searching. People came together to ask, what should we do? Many people there was a general consensus that many people thought he should be brought down, level him down. And there was one woman, one wise woman who was a farmer, who wept and said, no, we shouldn't level him down. We should instead level him up. Okay? Why was he saying that? Well, because we need the state. Also, now, I mean, it will not make sense for someone thinking about our contemporary problems when you have a leader that is really being brutal, and then you ask someone that you should give him more power. One of the things that we should notice is that some of these leaders, when they behave like that, they don't behave like that from a place of strength. They behave from the space of weakness. In fact, what it means to be a queen, what it means to be a prince, is to have things that cannot be done to you. And these leaders, Akhenaten of Egypt, Nelson Mandela, Madeba Mandela, Sundiata Keita, all of them, they all had their weaknesses. And so let me give one example with the Supreme Court of the United States. Supreme Court judges are already powerful. The fact that they decide life and death issues in America. Now, one of the things that the founding fathers of the United States did was that instead of saying, when they behave poorly, when it might be there was a time that they favor one party than the other, and they do this, and they take the favoritism. And what the founding fathers of the United States did, instead of saying that they will be elected and that they will have like 4 years to be in power, what they did was that they instead gave them life tenure. That is, give them this remarkable power. But now, when you give them life tenure, here are some of the effects. It doesn't guarantee that they will not abuse it, but it does buy good behavior. They can afford to be impartial. Okay? They can afford to basically, they can afford to not have the court, like someone said to me, like one African American described the court in United States with reference to them, that I would say in my language is a court of cockroaches and chicken. The cockroaches eat, the chickens eat cockroaches. And it doesn't matter whether the cockroach is guilty or not. The cockroach said, look, I'm innocent. They will still eat cockroaches anyway. So they say, this is like the kangaroo court. But to avoid that, instead of if you brought them down, they'll even do worse. They'll be like politicians, everyday politicians in United States. Now, what do? You level them up. And who are the people to do this? Well, I'm not saying that this could work in United States or that it will work in many African countries. In the state of Gonzo, it worked because there's a tradition, there's a precedent. Gonzo instituted this. If Africans want to do this, they will have to take this comprehensive constitution on Gonzo and institute it. And if they do that, people will automatically begin to demand all of this. They will demand that their government be responsive to them.
Okay, well, I think we have time for just one last question before we say goodnight. I'm going to take just the last question from the audience. I have found that poor Black people understand very well why we must fight here, where we are shown we do not belong in the white American ideology. and when you look them in the eye, they seek to beat you down. That is why a human from Africa does not just obey. In fact, when word of what happened in one of these instances of police violence reached a village in northern Ghana by my friend, a young spiritualist, the old spiritualist got to his feet and said, "Let us go. We have work to do to stop this."
Okay, so just paraphrase the question. Let me just get it because it's a very important one, please.
Well, I don't want to misinterpret the question, but I think the question is for you to elaborate. I think it's an invitation to elaborate on the relation between the power structure you're describing and how it might apply or not apply, or how it relates to the power relations we're seeing play out day after day, year after year here in America for Black Americans.
Wonderful, wonderful. Again, one of in fact, I just got out a paper right now. Some people in Italy, they invited me to write a paper about the current situation in America. And I wrote a paper entitled "The Refounding of United States," subtitle "A Matter of Black Lives." I didn't say Black Lives Matter, a matter of Black lives. Now, I think that there are guideposts in America. Let me give you one powerful problem that African American and white Americans face in this country. Prince Harry, wonderful person, a personality for me. It will take him marrying an African American and having a kid with him to be awakened, he said. And he said, I don't know, now I begin to see what it feels like to live in the country that was created by whites for whites. I know that he got a lot of backlash on that, but this guy was speaking sincerely for his age. In fact, that is the kind of royal art of thinking that he said that. Now, what he's saying here is echoed by Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence in America. Jefferson pondered aloud. He wrote. He said, people were wondering whether African Americans shall one day be free. And he wrote, he said, he himself had a kid with an African American. And so what he's saying, you could really think about it. You should take it seriously. He said, for abolitionists and who were wondering whether there will be a free, said there is nothing written in the book of fate that African American shall one day be free. And then he said there is nothing written in the book of fate than that two races equally free can live together under one government. Two races equally free cannot live together. And this is not just by Jefferson, even the abolitionists and African Americans back then, Black people, they too thought in this line. They went to Abraham Lincoln to say, look, please, can you found us a colony in South America so we can move there and create our own state? So the option for I mean, the reason why Prince Harry said it very clearly, the way that America was founded, it was founded by white people for white men. that's not hidden. All these white men, they came from all over, because founding a state is like a storm that comes through town. Uproot trees, move them from one end and deposit them in another, tear down houses, destroy crops, remove the soil, and then open the space for new growth. And America was founded. Look, all these people that came from Europe, from England, from France, from Northeast Europe, these were tribal people. They came here with different mores, with different presidents, with different symbols and rituals. But once they were here, the founding of America was the idea of throwing away all those entrenched prejudices and forming a union of white. We are all white. We are not German. We are all white. And for that reason, and this is not trivial, because for that reason, that is why the idea that you could found America, that black and white can just live like this, it doesn't work like that. The civil rights activists of the 1960s with Martin Luther King, wonderful job, good job, but what did they do? Well, what they did was to have this Civil Rights Act passed. But for them to pass that Civil Rights Act, they have to make it to encompass everybody, women, everybody, including immigrants that are not already here, that are still to come. Okay, it was a wonderful thing, but that only helped to highlight to African Americans that black lives doesn't matter. Why didn't this was about black people? When it comes down to the civil rights, it was about everybody. Now, there are guideposts for the person who asked a question. Someone like Abraham Lincoln provided a guidepost with, because the option that Jefferson left us with will be that two equally free people cannot live together. Either the African American subjugate the white, or the white re-enslave black people. And the white supremacists, they know this very well. Now the problem here now is that at the end of the day, Abraham Lincoln did something remarkable. It wasn't just he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, paid for with his own life. These are not things that politicians do. And then he made a speech at Gettysburg. This is very serious matter. Slavery, the war was fought over this matter. At Gettysburg, with 50,000 Union and the Confederate army dead, corpses are being buried. They are smelling. He stood there and he gave the Gettysburg Address. And he said, we are hereby resolving that government of the people, for the people, by the people shall never perish. That these men will not have died in vain. They died fighting for these two people to live together, these two races to live together. That they will not, and then he, instead of appealing to the Constitution of America, the little book, what he appealed to was instead the Declaration. He said, when the founding father said all men are created equal, they mean all men, meaning African American too. He paid for with his life. And the interesting thing was the ritual, the symbolism, where he made the speech, the look on his face, the people that were present, the smell of the olfactory, the touch of standing on that spot and touching the place, looking at the people at the cemetery. The soldiers are sitting there with blood. That is very important. Martin Luther King mimicked this. Martin Luther King stood right before Lincoln Memorial to make his I have a dream speech. And that speech took the truth of America. Him and Lincoln used God, very important. You might, if you're an intellectual, you might not have heard it, but most of America heard this, okay? And now today, the idea that Black people still come out, they say with their slogan that Black Lives Matter. That to me is remarkable, and it calls for the United States of America to look at all the resources that it has, not just appealing to the Constitution of the data of the Constitution, but looking at all the resources that it has in order to accomplish this. And I think the resource of one Gonzo is telling them is that it will be telling Americans that it's not enough to have the formal rights, and that some of the time you need to do something remarkable. Call for a constitutional convention that is only about African American, not about Native American, not about immigrants, not about, only about African American. And at that moment, when the time comes, when people will be asking the question the way that I said, that where are we going wrong? I was at Harvard when young white girls stopped eating. For some reason, they call it bulimia, anorexia. I was at Harvard when this happened. And people were asking, where did we go wrong? People are putting money, try giving people fellowships to research and find out why our girls in the ocean of food will suddenly stop eating. But not the same thing. We have the crime bill of 1990, which the president was there to sign. I'm not saying that it was done out of malice, because someone who thinks that George Floyd is the problem doesn't know what they are talking about. George Floyd is just a symbol. George Floyd is a police trained in Minneapolis by us. You know, in fact, locking him up, I don't know what that means. But the problem are all the symbols. The Black Lives Matter, they are right in Virginia to attack the statues of Lee, General Lee. But they are wrong to think that that's the only problem. In fact, the problem is that all the symbols and all the rituals, the statues, the pictures, the painting, they are all white. And when you go to the Rotundo in the Capitol, look up and you see all these figures, they are all white. If you are a white person, you see that you belong. There are men and women. If you are an African American, you ask yourself, who am I here? And so one of the things that happened from the riot, from the person who asked the question, is very interesting to me. I was watching it on television, and what I saw, what touched me was not the desecration of the shrine, one of the most powerful shrines of the land. That's not what touched me. That one was obvious. What touched me was what was going on in those mob, in the minds of those white young people, most of them white, chanting USA, USA as they march into that capital. When they march in there, what was going through their mind? I say that some of them were white supremacists. Please, this is academic discourse. Please don't call me on this. But a lot of them are young white men who look at America and they don't know what America is for them anymore. It's no longer home for them. They cannot see themselves there. They don't recognize this. And I say to myself when I was sitting, I say, now the young white men know what it feels like to be an African American here, only to the land, the only place that you call yours for over 400 years, that you don't think that you believe you belong there. I said, now they know what it feels like. Now, when this happened, just like African American, I'm not saying that the para is not the same. Please don't quote me on this, because this is your history. You know this better than I do. Now, when this happened, I was watching. The first thing that went through the mind is the corporation, the giant corporation that control our means of free speech. They emit Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, they call another one Instagram. They cut them off. I mean, they cut them off, all of them. And then they restricted their freedom of speech, just like what they do to African Americans in a different level. They put them on a no-fly zone by corporation. Now, as I say, now they know what it feels like. A country, now that's another, it's not just about white and black. Now you can see how this also manifests somewhere when people believe that they don't belong. But this is the problem with the Constitution, and I think that you should send people from script to Nso, Yuva. Let them go there and study the Constitution.
Yeah, let's work on it. Yeah.
So, let's leave it here, please. I can go on, and we can go on forever. So
we'd love to have you back someday when we're in person as well. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us the wisdom of Nso. And thank you all for coming and listening and participating. And I hope we see you in a couple of weeks at our next event.
Wonderful.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you guys very much. Bye.
Let him